Our short AVXL is down nicely. We should catch up on that one, actually. We're getting closer to results there, so let's take a look. Other annoying thing, I disable Windows shutting down, which Windows loves to shut itself down for no reason. I hate using different systems. I even have the same exact computer that I use at home. AVXL. 600 million market cap, that doesn't sound right. Let's look at the latest filing. They're really on a different fiscal year. That's hilarious. Okay, 85 million shares outstanding. Okay, maybe it is right. Lincoln Park. Not exactly a good sign when Lincoln Park is here. Well, they kind of provide an ATM in some ways. When retail is your main investor, they just throw everything in the 10Q about the drug. Who helps this company with their filings? Because this is like the worst. This is not what you're supposed to put in a 10Q. I mean, it kind of, the SEC doesn't care, but okay, here's an MD&A. This is the main part you're supposed to put in. I have this whole like clinical trial description section, which doesn't really make too much sense. This company's hilarious. Okay, rally's fading now. S&P only up 7 basis points. Nvidia's traded the most with 63 million shares. It's up 3%. We're long. Trump said that Pharma is going to have tariffs. So the pharma sector is down a little bit as the pharma sector figures out what does that mean. The pharma sector has lots of intermediate products that are overseas, but often has some U.S. solution in the supply chain somewhere. The one I'd be concerned with maybe is Novo Nordisk. Novo bought a bunch of Catalent plants for fill finish. So if you make the API in Denmark, send that to the US, I'm assuming that gets tariffed, but that's an internal transfer, right? So that's, let's say it does get tariffed, fine. Your cost of goods went up, but that doesn't really impact the fill finish and the sold product that's technically manufactured in the US. So this is all about tax transfer and transfer pricing, which, you know, there's a lot you could sort of get away with when you do that. I'm fairly reasonably seasoned on that, not as much as some of the major pharmas that do this, but I've done it as well, where if you have a subsidiary in the US and you have a parent company overseas, how much does the parent company sell the drug to the subsidiary, which is the same company? That can change the tax treatment of the products, and here it would change the tariff treatment as well. SPY decides to rally up 80 basis points after all. Wild roller coaster session here. Huma's up 23%. Explain the reasoning behind the PayPal long. I think I did that yesterday. Trump hailed as a very stable genius. I don't think you should really care about Trump and the markets and tariffs. The markets had a small correction. I've said this a million times. Focus on what you can do. If you want to be a macro person, you can do that. You'll have to find like a really good macro person to follow, because it's not me. People on Wall Street, like, you don't do it all. Like, I think the average retail investor doesn't understand that, like, if you have a job on Wall Street, your job isn't to worry about global trade policy and then also worry about biotech in the same day. It doesn't make any sense. You stick to what you can do effectively and ignore everything else. I would drive myself crazy if I had to worry about the macro environment and like how it's going to affect stocks, and then also worry about, if Anavex is going to EMA approval, right? And then also worry about what's happening in crypto, or what's happening in real estate, or what's like, what? I know who good macro guys are, but they're not people online you can follow. So I don't know. To me, it's a pretty simple formula that we're doing, that I'm trying to teach and have people follow. And you can see that I'm trying to ignore. At the same time, I feel like people are curious. They want to know about it. But I think you have to look at companies. Let's look at PayPal, for example, which we worked on extensively yesterday. We actually didn't really do a DCF, so let me quickly do one. But the point I'm going to make, which I want you to really internalize, is that a company is worth the discounted sum of its cash flows. Nothing more, nothing less. Why? Because ultimately, if you're a business owner, if you've ever been a business owner, there's one thing that matters, which is your bottom line at the end of the year. And it's no different with a publicly traded company in the long run. In the short run, there's all kinds of noise and nonsense. I'm trying to encourage you to ignore those things. Why? Because the market is a discounting machine. is very, very good at also ignoring those things. In relatively short periods of time, the market will see what you see. There'll be noise. The price may not go exactly as you planned. You may get it wrong. But if you follow this method, typically you'll be successful because the market will discount the long-term cash flows of the company into the stock price. The long-term cash flows, here's the real big point I'm trying to make. The long-term cash flows of PayPal have nothing to do with Donald Trump. They really have nothing to do with trade policy. They have nothing to do with anything other than things that affect PayPal specifically. And so to me, and again, I'm not disparaging anybody that looks at the world otherwise, but the way I do things is it would be very irresponsible and just downright a waste of my time to worry about any of those other things. Because my job is to worry about PayPal. My job is, if I'm trading PayPal, is to learn the payments industry, which quite frankly I don't know that much about. But here's the point. I can take my time, which I have very limited amounts of, and I can invest it in learning a fascinating industry, the payments industry. I learned a little bit about it yesterday. I was reading about Visa, and I could spend a few hours learning about it more today. Or I can worry about what some politicians are doing that I can't change, and that if I hedge appropriately, it doesn't affect me at all. Or at least it affects me very de minimisly. Because for everything I'm long, I have a short, and more or less, it's not going to really impact my portfolio. And the market is smart. The market says, well, even if Trump does this, let's say Trump goes hog wild with tariffs and never stops. Okay, if they're a good move, the new president will keep them. If they're a bad move, the new president will reverse them. And as we discount these cash flows, I really want you to pay attention to this. I've just built a mock sort of DCF. It's pretty elementary, but it'll do for our purposes. I'm going to bold the net income line, which is the line we really care about as a business owner. And when we buy a stock, you become a business owner. You're a very small business owner, a small fraction of a very large company in this case. But as you become a better investor, you might become a more serious holder of some of the smaller companies. I've certainly owned big chunks of publicly traded companies, so you can do it too. And Warren Buffett, for example, owns big chunks of big companies. But here is the net income. Well, here's the net income theoretically for PayPal. Next year they'll make $6 billion. And the next year they'll make 6.2, and the next year they'll make 6.6, and the next year they'll make 7.1. That's the ideal situation. They may not do that. At maturity, let's assume they'll grow 1%, which is a very modest amount. And I think some of you will give yourself a gold star, and some of you will realize investing is not for you after this question I'm going to give you. So I'm going to discount all of the cash flows by 8%. Okay, and a company goes into perpetuity. It goes out till forever. PayPal may be here 100 years from now. I don't know. But it's telling me that the value of all these cash flows is 121 billion. Now, this is a very dry formula. If you don't know the formula, then I encourage you to learn a little bit of finance, because this is the financial business after all. Okay, so we assume that this is right. This is, when I sum these numbers, they actually sum to a trillion. But because we're discounting them, because the dollars of 2042 are not worth the same as the dollars of 2025, the discounted sum is $121 billion. And that's a lot higher than the current stock price, which is why I like the stock. I didn't even need to do this calculation yesterday. I just knew it. Intuitively, I wanted to finish the details, but this was more than good enough, just looking at the numbers in my head. But now that they're here, I'm very happy. Now, I want to graph this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy paste this. Okay, I'm going to copy paste it maybe down here. I'm going to say this is with or without Trump. And let's say Trump makes the earnings for PayPal for the next, when does his term end? 2028, right? He makes earnings for PayPal for the next, is it 26? 28? 28. He cuts them in half the earnings for PayPal. Now, that's not what's going to happen to PayPal, but we're making an extreme example, okay? 50% cut to PayPal's earnings. And the new president changes it back. So if we graphed these two, they would look like this. It's the same line, except the orange line has this like lower earnings, and then they come to the same. When the new president comes and changes things back, perhaps a Democrat, perhaps a Republican, we're back to normal. Now, there is a possibility the new president doesn't change things, but let's exclude that for now. What is the NPV of the bottom line? What is this NPV of this line? Where the next 4 years of earnings are hobbled? Take a guess. I want you guys to think about it. Is it a lot different? It's not a lot different. And that's kind of a worst case scenario, I think. The market's smart. The market's pricing these things in. The market knows that we're not going to destroy capitalism as we know it. Certainly not for most companies. That's why the market's up 42 basis points and not down 40%. If earnings were permanently changed, the market would be down 40%. But we have systems that keep those kinds of things from happening. If presidents make a mistake, we have systems to correct that. If presidents make a good move that people thought was a mistake, which maybe this will be, who knows, then the market will figure that out too. If nobody's sure, well, the market will price in some amount of uncertainty, and we'll go from there. But why in the world would I worry about this? It just doesn't stand to reason. There are people who make money trading the macro environment, but they also never look at stocks. So they trade big baskets of stocks. This is places like Bridgewater, Discovery, Element. There's great Soros. There's great macro investors out there. But they're trading currencies. They're trading bonds. They're trading CDSs. They're trading indices. They're trading interest rates principally. This is not the kind of stuff we trade, and it's not the kind of stuff you can trade. You don't have agreements with Goldman Sachs to trade steepeners and flatteners, do you? So why do you care? I think a lot of people care because they want to maximize their portfolio by timing the market. They're saying, okay, well, maybe the market will go down, so I'll buy then. And do you think the market's going to go down, Martin? I think it might. Well, this is called gambling. And I'm just not going to participate in that because I don't know what's going to happen in the stock market today or tomorrow. And because I don't trade interest rates, I don't trade currencies, I don't trade commodities or indices. I don't want to trade those things. I want to trade stocks. I want to look at one stock and say, well, this is a good stock and buy it. I'll look at another stock, I'll be short it. And I more or less can try to make money on both directions. And my skill as a stock picker is the thing I'm betting on. I've never met a single person on Wall Street that does all of those things. That looks at every asset class and trades every sector of the world and every asset class of the world. I've never met a single person that can do that. And there's a lot of arrogant people on Wall Street. Nobody is that arrogant to pretend they could do it all, which is surprising because Wall Street's a pretty wild place. But they would get laughed at. And I would laugh at you if you think that that's something you want to do. So if you want to trade macro properly, all right, trade interest rates, trade bonds, trade indices, don't look at stocks. But you're on the wrong live stream. That's not what we do over here. Now, could I do that? And could I show off some tools that we're building at Godel and DL Software to do those kinds of things? Yes. I think eventually, as we build those tools out, I'll probably do a little bit of that. But right now we're sort of in our stock lane, which is the lane I've lived in my whole life. So switching to another lane is pretty uncomfortable anyway. But I will show off some tools at some point. But it's still, when I do that, you'll have all my admonitions that this isn't what I do. I don't know this stuff really well. I'll be learning just as you would be. And I certainly wouldn't be putting lots of real money on that. So that's kind of the point. The long-term prospects of a business really have nothing to do with government and government moves, as they shouldn't. So, that's sort of the way I look at it. Okay, so we're looking at this stock. Is kind of the next Cassava, called Anavex. It's this like the Alzheimer's company. In my opinion, sort of very bad actor. And I can read the news here. 4-year presentation BS. Alzheimer's patients are just getting worse at the normal rate. It looks like they're getting a placebo. I think we're gonna make a lot of money shorting this one. It's the same story as Cassava in that, you know, it's all retail investors. They need a real website. Okay, so really bizarre company. Somebody asked a really smart question, which is how do they think the drug's going to work for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Rett's all at once? But if you go, you basically have to go back in time and look at a history of the drug. And okay, yeah. So here, it's interesting. I thought I took more notes on this. Maybe they're in a different file, but I can recreate all of it. So this is the original. No, this is not the original. This is some of the original work done by some French guy 20 years ago. Let's take a look. This drug goes back like generations. I had a lot of fun tracking it down. So this guy was the inventor, basically. And I spent a lot of time trying to look into this guy's life. And he'd been working on this sort of family of furanethamines, furanethamines, which basically no one's ever used other than him, as far as I know. So he had made a ton of these. And if you look at the patent, there is no patent because basically he took an older series of drugs as his scaffold, if I recall correctly. And as you can see, you know, it wasn't really clear what he was going for, whether he was going for muscarinic or not. The muscarinic pathway is well interrogated in Alzheimer's. So yeah, now I have to go back and like think about this. Trying to retrace my footsteps. The path here is very funny and almost nobody knows this, which is the fun part about this stock. You know, the baggies like to think they do real research, but I'll show you how it's done. You have to go back to the really old SEC filings. Okay, so 1978. I just gotta find my model on this. Maybe it's on my local. Let me see if it's on my local. I think it might be. No, I got the same file here. I guess I'll have to just recreate what I did. Okay, so here's one of the ways to do this. So you want to go back really far. It's the beginning of the company on sec.gov. And you can see, you know, it's like this weird reverse merger, which, you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But they went public in 2017 as like some printer company or something. Thrifty Printing Inc. Talking about modems and ISDN lines. That doesn't make too much sense in 2004, but okay. No wonder their business failed. 2006, they're still Thrifty Printing. Online photo finishing services. These guys, that was like we accept MasterCard or Visa. $3 for 100 prints, and 3 cents for an additional, Jesus Christ. Okay, so this guy, 𝗕𝗲𝗄𝗏. These two Chinese guys. So Harvey decides to merge with Anavex, or to create Anavex, okay? From the printing company to Anavex. So now they're Anavex. This is 2007. So at some point they decide to stop doing photo printing. Pretty quickly, actually, it looks like. Let's see if they mention Pharma in prior 10K. Still just Thrifty Printing. Okay, there's a name change. The letter of intent announced December 28, 2006. The company is to acquire a portfolio of innovative drug compounds. That's blarcamesine. That's what they acquired. So that's the first trace of the existence of this. It was 12. Get that date again? See, it wasn't exactly a merger, just a name change. It was, I think, Harvey signing for this thing. I can't tell. Okay, so they actually did do the name change through the merger. Okay, but there was some, gotta do a painstaking job here, unfortunately. Well, here's the name change, ticker change. Okay, so there's a little bit here, like here's the agreement with them, Vacadese. Let me see if I could find that announcement they made.
These guys tried to compete with Kodak for photo printing. Their accountant goes, dude, their auditor, this is in actual US dollars, $12,000. Where's the revenue? So Harvey ends up leaving very, very early on, and 𝗦𝗏 sort of took over, but he was the original person behind the kind of stock, I guess. So if you try to go back to 2000, and let's try to do that, go back to 2006. So December 28, 2006. What do I look for? Thrifty printing? Anavex? I don't even know. There's some news. Maybe some of this is lost to history. Oh, okay. Under a letter of intent announced December 28th. Okay, so I don't think they announced it. I think this is the first, pretty sure this is the first mention of it. So let's look at this maybe. Okay, so they got a pharma guy to join the board. Anavex, formerly Thrifty Printing, gets a Novartis guy. On January 31st, 2007, we entered into an agreement where we got 3 patents from Dr. 𝗦𝗏𝗡𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 Again, they're not US patents. And then they agreed to hire him, but then he didn't stick around. I'd love to have a conversation with him. Let's see if we can find him. The patents and patent application are registered in the Greek National Office of Industrial Property. We have discontinued our previous business of providing online photo finishing services and decided to engage in the research and development of novel drugs for treatment of cancer and the central nervous system. A bold new step forward. Kelowna, British Columbia? Oh geez, that's where Quest lives. Quest is my internet best friend, if you guys don't know. We've been developing our site, kingford.net, as an online photo community. I mean, they could have been Instagram. Okay, prepare to be amazed. This method is to be applied for the obtention. If that's a word, I'm gonna use that from now on. Obtention. To obtain, kind of like to obtain. Okay, so this is maybe one of the patents. New sigma receptor ligands with anti-apoptotic properties with neuroprotective, anti-cancer, anti-metastatic, and anti-chronic inflammatory action. Sweet. I love it when a drug does those things. Okay, so we have to go find the Greek patent. Let's go. Big market in Greece. These random Chinese guys got a bunch of stock for like 24 grand. I'm sure they sold it a long time ago, but it's kind of funny. Oh, and this guy, 𝗏𝗏, he was the co-founder of Thrifty Printing, and he walked away with some money. Okay, so 𝗩𝗏𝗡𝗏 was 62, 20-ish years ago. We gotta find this man. I looked into his career. It was very weird. Here's his, it wasn't exactly normal. Here's his bio. He was at INSERM, which was neat, but then when he was doing stuff in France, he was doing a little better, I think, than when he did stuff in Greece. It says he's been published over 80 times in highly respected medical scientific journals, but let's sort by date. This guy was doing all the 1980s and 1990s Alzheimer's targets. Come on, man. Here he starts with the furans, so 1996. Aha, here's his first disclosures, 2002. This is written in French. And this looks like the first English publication, 2007. This is before Misling shows up. And you can see it had muscarinic activity, which is basically all you need to know. I mean, potent muscarinic and sigma ligand. M1 Ki of 18 nanomolar and sigma 1 of 44 nanomolar. But sigma 1 is kind of nonsense. Yeah, I recommend reading this paper. And here's the... So what's interesting about this is that if you look back, this chemical series was already well interrogated. He didn't just come up with this one. Somebody else had been developing it, or not developing it, but researching this series. There are drugs. It's happened in the history of pharmaceuticals where you could sometimes have a drug, an old drug that seems to work mysteriously. It has happened. It's generally not a recipe for success, but it has happened. Look at xanolamine. Okay, so we'll study this fairly carefully. Let's check in on the market real quick. SPY's up 30 bips.